I have read, and I've pretty well satisfied myself that I understand a little bit about the origins of colonialism. I really don't know enough about the individual politics of decisions that were made back during the days of the Romans, for example. I had to translate from the Latin to English Caesar's Gallic Wars when I was in high school. And I was very bad at Latin. But at the same time, I liked it. I liked going into the logic of this language because I was interested in in the story. So I worked real hard to translate that story and to learn the language because I was interested in the story, you know, of Caesar's wars. All Gaul is divided into three parts. And learning about how that kind of civilization was put together through its desire for conquering other lands and building a great empire, I wanted to know what is the logic behind that. What does that give a human being and its people and his or her people? What does that give you to be able to conquer like that rather than visit, rather than go visiting? You know, why didn't the Romans go up and visit the Gauls, and check them out, and hang out with them
Then go home, tell the
and talk
tale,
about
come
them,
back.
yeah, and party with them. If you need to drink and you need to fight and you need to show your testicles and those kinds of things, go ahead. But you don't need to kill off whole societies of people. And when the Romans did this, of course, it set a standard for the rest of civilization at that time, that conquering and Roman rule was becoming the order of the day. And when they left, well, they've never truly left Western Europe. They're still there. And not only are they there, but they crossed the waters and came over here. They crossed the waters and went into Africa. They crossed the waters and took their riffraff into Australia. I really don't know how the Romans developed the thought of this conquering kind of thing, but I know that it had the right mixture of tribes that came together under the Roman Empire. The right mixtures of people that came in there, and it kind of like sometimes when you see the wind running across the prairie, you can just see the wind running, and then all of a sudden it will meet with another small wind or something even smaller, and then all of a sudden you have a dust devil, we call it. And when you have a mixture like that of something happening, you have something inside that's called a spirit. You have sometimes people say don't jump inside the dust devils, because they have demons inside of them, or something bad can happen to you, or whatever. But I always studied those dust devils, and I've studied history a lot like that, and watched that the right ingredients among people like the Romans at that time created a need for conquering. Now you can go into historical dialogue about the political reasons that were created by the Romans themselves for this conquering, because one always needs to justify to his people what he's doing in a way that matches the logic of his people, so that he can not only get support and votes from them, but also acquire soldiers and people who believe in what they're saying into the system. When that happens, you have all the right ingredients. We've been talking about this cooking business and everything. If you've got the right ingredients, you can cook up a stew, and a stew that will just knock people out. And what's happened with the Romans, they had that proper ingredient that just traveled. Their science and everything was devoted almost entirely. People like to say, oh, they studied the stars and they had great libraries, blah, blah, blah. What they really studied was war. They studied how to manufacture better shields. They battering rams, scorched earth policy, where you just lay everything out. That's the kind of war you make. It's take no, give no mercy. Don't leave a single tomato vine standing. Don't leave a peach tree standing. Nothing. You destroy everything. And they were very powerful with this. They had their legions divided up into so many kinds of soldiers. They were like the modern day tanks. They could move. You know, they had guards on their knees to keep the arrows from penetrating their knees. They did this thing with the shields on top of their heads, and they marched in such precision. You know, Hitler's armies marching through Berlin were as precise as the Romans. I saw it all again. They were marching. They were marching for colonialism. If the Americans think that their colonialism, or that Africans' colonialism and anything is any better in the world of morality than what the Nazis did, they're mistaken. To me, they are the same. What they've done to the earth and to the minds of human beings, it's the same kind of thing. Now, people will always say, well, they're death camps. You don't understand. You know, you're here in a safe place, blah, blah, blah. You know, that you don't understand what it feels like to have all your people tortured and gassed to death, you know. And, you know, when people have that kind of discussion with me, it's almost like I get so weary of hearing about the short order of hardships for the Jewish people, you know, within World War II. I get so tired of hearing that as if it was the only world crisis that ever happened, with all due respect to those who suffered. But the suffering has gone on anywhere colonialism enters. And the suffering here in the Americas, or in Central America, or in South America, or as it is in your country, is no less severe when people are suffering. Suffering is suffering. The death of children, you know, when I see all those beautiful young kids in Bosnia, you know, I can look at white kids, I can look at white people and see the beauty of their nativeness, of their tribalness, in their, you know, I see it in you two guys, you know. I see a tribalism in your history. And that's good, you know, because there's a little bit of something that's real, that's still alive, and it's in you. Patriotism, of course, means fatherland, where you come from. There's something inherent in all of us human beings that causes us to feel like we come from somewhere. We come from this place. Whatever creation has done to us in this world, it has put a sense of place in our hearts. Now, when you become colonial people, you know, they talk longingly about Ireland or about England or Spain or whatever. But they can't, there's a book that what's-his-name wrote called You Can't Go Home Again. And the title of that is so fitting for colonialism. It's almost as if colonial people can't go home again. It's almost as if they have bred each other to the point of where they've lost any identity with their homelands.
But aren't they victims then?
They're victims of their own circumstances, yeah, sure they are. I don't feel sorry for them in that sense, but I feel sorry in the sense that they don't know where they belong. I think that everyone needs to know that he belongs somewhere, and the Americans have never, ever indicated that they belong here because of the homeland, because it's a homeland, or because they love the animal life, or the great vast forests, or the clean water, or the wonderful skies, or all of us cute native people running around out, you know, butt naked on the prairies. You know, they don't have any sense of real respect for beauty. It's not complicated. There's just no love for true beauty in the hearts of colonial people. Because, parks, like the Romans, the foremost thing in their minds is conquering. It's always about conquering. I don't care how many environmental groups are formed. There should be no need for environmental groups. We didn't have those here until just recently. We didn't have people running out on the coast to save the whale. You know, this woman, did you read in the news where this Anglo woman was protesting the Macaw Indians hunting there once a year to take the one whale? She was out there protesting with some other protesters out there, and the Coast Guard ran into her boat and sent her to the hospital. And I'm thinking, you know, what an idiot this woman is. She has no respect for what these people are doing. She has no respect for the whale. The connection The connection of nature is between the macaws and the whale. She has no business there. It doesn't include her. What she needs to be doing is working in a whale sperm factory, creating more baby whales. If she really wants to help, create some more whales and change the minds of people who massacre the animals, who massacre other human beings, who massacre whole species of animals and human beings till there's no more left. That's where she needs to be involved. Right. She doesn't understand that relationship between the macaws and the whale. That's a spiritual connection. She can't get it. That's the way America, and that's the way colonialism works. It doesn't get it. I'm not so certain about this power of the word. You know, that I hear in song, you know, the sword, the pen is mightier than the sword, and I think about that, and then when I think the pen is mightier than the sword, then I think of that Woody Guthrie song, some men rob you with a six gun, some with a fountain pen. And so, you know, the pen in America has become an instrument of robbery. You know, because our ancestors, there were other things that, there was other means for taking a man's word or a woman's word on their heart. You know, signing. Where did this signing a paper get to where people, you know, your promise wasn't any good unless you signed this paper? You know, how can you do that? You know, well, here again, you have that division between what a person chooses in this life. What kind of journey are you going to lead? You know, are you going to lead a journey of honor? Are you going to lead a journey of deceit? And some of us try to walk on both roads. You know, when I was, especially years ago when I was a drinker, you know, I walked both roads. And man, that wasn't easy. You know, kind of like split me right up the middle. And that's what these kids are trying to do. You know, they're trying to walk both roads. And they're afraid not to at least say they accept this religion. They accept it out of fear, not the fear of the Creator, but the fear of that's been handed down from their parents, that if you don't believe this, they're going to take you to jail, or they're going to you'll be punished in some way if you don't believe this. And that
so the word doesn't work. Does it?
I don't know. I don't know. That's what we were talking about a while ago. I said I'm looking for the next step now. I'm looking for the next step. Bombing doesn't work. You know, these people. There's white people in America that are fed up with the system, but they're fed up for all the wrong reasons. They're fed up because it's moved in another direction away from the racism and the hangings and all this kind of racist. You know, there's a certain segment of America that still longs for the days where they can go back and kill Indians and shoot off the buffalo, you know, and kill off a whole species of animals. And somehow or another, a lot of those people attach that with Christianity. They attach that with things like man shall have dominion over the earth. They think if you go out and kill off whole species of animals, you got dominion over it. You know, that's really dangerous, man. So these kids are having a hard time trying to figure all this out. You know, they fear they'd be punished by these kinds of people. And we know that bombings don't work. You know, America is just, you know, terrorism is everywhere in America now. You know, they don't like to talk about it because they don't want to seem like they're in the decline of their great empire. And, you know, they hate being compared to Rome. Americans do. Oh, it's different. You know, well, of course it's not. It's not. Because people might look different, speak a different language, doesn't mean that the system itself, the society itself, is any different. It's just as greedy and as obsessed as the Romans were. The only thing that I can see to do right now is to continue on with this new school. And I hate to even talk about that too much, because in a country like America, you know, you can get killed for wanting to start a school that deals with the truth, and where you're actually teaching children to research history in a compare and contrast way like they've never been taught in any of the colonial schools. Europeans get taught a lot of the origins of history. I mean, they're really into the analytical stages of of how something began, from even like the questions that you ask. Those people over there analyze extremely into the origins of things, into the origins of civilizations, etc. The word civilization, or the word civilized, actually means to make civil, to make something civil. And based upon that civility, then that's where, you know, the arts sprang out, or the need to make pottery, or fashion clothes, or have certain kinds of music, blah, 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 on and on. That's what civility, it means to be civil.
It's like being enslaved.
To be civil, to be respectful of one another. And out of that respect, then blossoms your culture. That's what civilization means. This is one of the things that bothers people when we're talking to the kids about the difference between what is truly right and wrong. You know, if for no reason at all I just haul off and slap the shit out of you sitting right here, for no reason at all, that's obviously going to be the act of a crazy person, or someone who's intent on doing something wrong or creating trouble. If I don't do that, if I just say, good job, my brother. Now, which one of those is in the long run going to have more effect? Probably upon you, the slapping. But in most people, it would be, the act of civility, the act of respect. That's how you reach people, human beings. But with other people, civility, they'll shoot you down in the streets. I remember this friend of mine, we were listening to Charles Kuralt, Babylon, on one of his morning shows, his Sunday morning shows. And this is this guy all of America respected, that they found out that when he was dead all this time, he'd been having this liaison with this young woman, and she sued the estate for his property and everything, and here's this old chicken-eating a fat guy with big lips talking about how wonderful it is in America. At least, and it was talking about Bosnia and everything. He says, at least in America, we're not killing each other over our religious beliefs. And this friend who I was sitting watching this with, he says, hell no, in America, you don't need a reason to kill somebody. And that's the way it is in colonial countries. You really don't need a reason. Highest murder rates in the world. Highest. What was it? The murder rates by handguns in China, or in Japan last year, something like 29. And in America, it's what, 35,000 or something like that, more than get killed in car wrecks. I remember being in Switzerland about 2 months ago, and I was walking with Lance's wife up in the mountains there, and I was up there walking, with her and Lance's daughter, and we were talking about how everything. She said something about how her life is arranged for her, and I'm looking around. And I said, well, there seems to be a great and tremendous order here in Switzerland. I said, there seems to be forests, seems to be some waterfalls, and there seems to be some respect for some old prehistoric sites, and there's walkways, and I haven't seen any garbage up here. I don't see people throwing their McDonald's cups out the window, and all that styrofoam stuff laying all over the countryside. And she said, yes, that's true, and that that there's very little crime in that part of, at least in that part of Switzerland. She said everything is pretty well arranged. And I said, I'm at the first time in my life, I feel like as I walk out here among all these other people who are out here walking, I don't feel like there's anybody out there that wants to kill me. I said, all of a sudden, I've had a feeling that I've never had really since I was a child. That's the feeling of I'm in a safe environment. And she says, that's the problem. The environment is too safe, and there's no room for creativity. I'm thinking, wow, how did this get created? So when you ask me the question, like, how do we take care of these things? It's like, I think we take care of them by finding out how they were created, where they come from. I tell the kids, We got all these religious denominations, that are blowing in on the reservations, and taking over schools, and especially, the Mormons. They're big on wanting to fit into the whole Native American life, and they've conveniently placed us into their mythology to declare us maybe one of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Or I've read a bit about it, and I think about how all of these non-native people get a hold of these religious ideals and then want to move them in onto the reservations. I don't know. Do you have Mormons in your country? What do you have?
I guess a few, but it's such a Catholic stronghold.
Oh, so it's Catholic. Yeah, your
It goes
country's
back
Catholic.
historically,
Yeah.
the wars, the 30-year war, and
Well, the Catholics, are
but we
granted.
are,
Yeah, it's like we was talking about the Romans and the spread of colonialism.
they're freaky. They're Roman Catholics, of course.
Of course, that's the first ones.
Yeah.
The very first ones.
Yep.
The Council of Nicaea in 356.
Yep.
Constantine.
Split.
The empire falling apart. It was the first observation, by the way, of the Christ Mass at Christmas on the birthday of Mithras, the Persian god, who was half bull and half human. Isn't that something?
Isn't that something?
I think about that. Maybe that's how the creature that the Christian fabulists, he may have been the one they used to create the Satan image. With the horns and the long tail with a little spear on the end of it, a pitchfork. Man. But at any rate, those religious groups that have taken they've taken a great deep whack out of the intelligence of Native people. A lot of us bite in on those kinds of things because we still have this sense of fear that we're going to be punished for saying what we believe. We'll be punished for saying, no, I don't want to come to your church. Let's say, well, we'll call the soldiers and they'll make you come to this church, or we'll come and take your kids and send them off to some distant school where you'll never see those kids again until they're mature, and when they come home, they're going to be ashamed of you. It bothers me that the kids don't question. We're taught not to question. That they don't question where these things come from. How did you come to want to believe in this denomination? And I'm not just picking on the Mormons, I'm picking on all of them. Because, as we say, to make it very clear, there's none of them mentioned in the Bible. Not a single one of these denominations is validated by anything, any mention of them in the Bible. None of them. And when people say, well, now how can you be sure? Well, of course I know how to read. And that's not what our colonial masters really wanted us to learn how to do. They did not want us to learn how to read. They did not want us to learn the true logic of their way of thinking. Although they wanted us to become kind of like emotional slaves, I guess, and physical slaves too, the survivors, that is, to that culture. And a lot of us have become just that way. We have become slaves to the culture. When I was a kid, the word traditional was not something that was an issue in our family. We never used that word, and because I didn't know what any of that meant. I just knew how we lived, but I wasn't even conscious of that in a way because I didn't have anything else to compare it with, except when we got television. When we got television, I thought all white kids were like the kids I saw in the Mickey Mouse Club. And I was about ready to go to high school, and I thought those kids acted like that, because I was going to go to a white high school there in Illinois, or at least a school where the politics of it ran by whites. And because I was so light complected when I first went to the school, I was an enigma to a lot of those students, that they didn't know what the deal was with my behavior, Well, I didn't know what the deal was with their behavior because they sure didn't act like those kids on that Mickey Mouse Club.
It's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. It's all a big misunderstanding.
some anthropologists would probably, they like to look and dig in the smallest parts of native societies to find at least some examples of where people have exploited the forests or exploited species of animals or species of humans in order to substantiate their own savagery in the earth, their own barbaric behavior. And there have been examples in the histories of the Americas prior to the Europeans coming here. There have been histories of examples of everything, but there are no examples of the kinds of mass destruction that that colonialism and the Roman style of colonialism. There are no examples of that kind of extremes, and I'm talking about Roman colonialism all the way through World War II. There have been no extremes of that proven in histories, in any of the histories of the Americas. Even with that, I'm not into comparing who is the worst in its behavior, but I'm into showing the examples of, how beautiful this landscape was, and how tremendous the forests were, and how clean things were, how there were no viruses here, just by the sheer numbers of diseases that were produced in Western civilizations. Gives you some idea, should give someone an idea of how wrong the direction was that it was headed. And it's still going that way. There's more diseases now than were in 1300. God, it just keeps the numbers of diseases keep increasing. But at any rate, that's the way colonialism runs and operates the world. Probably the only world that's not really afraid of American imperialism or doesn't show it is probably China. Yeah, the Americans don't want to fool with them. Yeah, that's an old culture.
That is an old culture.
Yeah, the
colonial itself over more thousands of years than any other.
The colonialism of Africa, South Africa, and India, and North America, Central America, South America is only about 400 years old.
They've got right this 3,000 years before Christ.
Yeah, it's incredible, and but they will colonialism. If it has its way, it'll move in on, and they exclaim about how terrible the Chinese are and how they killed all those kids in Tiananmen Square, everything. And of course, it was horrible for all those young kids to die. But it was also so horrible here in my country for all of our children to be getting killed by the Americans. The Americans killing our kids in their villages as they slept. We've had 400 years of Vietnam here. It wasn't just 20 years. We've had 400 years of people killing people in a country in which they don't belong, they don't have any business here. Well, that's what this school is about sovereignty, and it's about freedom, and it's about, but it's done through the arts. It's a thing through the arts. And when you ask, what the next step is, the next step is taking it through a new kind of vision of the arts. And it's coming from an intercreative world of Native American people that in a way that we've never done things before. This is not just something we're doing to, decorate condo walls or have nice books for people's coffee tables. And this is a kind of a sovereignty issue, but it's an intellectual sovereignty, first of all. It's an intellectual sovereignty where we actually, with the creation of this school, make decisions about how we are going to learn and about how we are going to research and study history and dispense with all the myth teaching that we've been taught, as most people in colonial countries are taught, about their origins, about the origins of the colonial people and how they come with religious freedom and all this kind of stuff. I want these kids to be able to study and research in these things and also travel to the countries of these origins. As you were saying earlier, I like what you're doing with that. I like these kids traveling to these places, but I want them to have a guide along, in a sense, to not only from the countries that we're visiting, but with our own people who have had experience in the mainstream world. Want them to be there to kind of have that balance of explanation. People who can be fluent in many different kinds of logic systems. Whether it's English or native or French or a German or whatever it may be. I want this logic to be manifested in these journeys, and when they're actually doing research in the libraries and in these religious these former seats of religious power, I want them to be able to read all this history. I want us to have people who know about the Quran, who know about the Bible, who know about these books, the Bhagavad Gita, know where they come from. And that's the one thing probably that in colonial countries that is going to be the most spooky, because people who have conquered other countries have always done it with by replacing religious values with their own. First of all, religious values, educational values, moral values, or moral end values. That's how it's always been done. What I want this school to do is not, I don't want to come out with a school in a proselytizing way of saying that we're going to reverse all of these kinds of things. But because you can't just get up and say that these kinds of things with colonialism are untrue, you've got to have students who are intellectually prepared to do some studying and research in a way that we Indian people have never done before. Never. The concept of being in a place, in an environment where creativity and courage and self-respect and confidence and those kinds of things are of the primary importance. What it would be, how it would be so easy to live in an uplifting society where the people respected its children and taught its children to respect the earth. That is so simple. That is such a simple, simple thing to do. And then people, philosophically will argue, well, it's not so simple or we would be doing it. No, it just says to me that you have, that the simple simplicity of things is less important than your greed. So.
And
that knowledge it's always been available here, but it's not been available to the thieves. You see, because the thieves never get what you have to offer anyway. They're interested in what you have produced that is tangible. A thief is not interested in intellectual knowledge for the most part. But there is such a thing, thieves on different levels, of course. There's a thief who is interested in the material. There's a thief who is interested in the intellectual. There's all kinds of thieves who don't want to have to do the actual work for themselves. It's like the colonial people. They didn't want to actually have to learn what it was like to live in this land. So they brought their own way that was proven not to be an effective way of life to begin with, disease-ridden, ridden with the politics of religious insanities. And they bring those not in a respectful way to learn the cultures of the Narragansett or the Wampanoags or whoever all else lived up there in that part of the world, or the Indians of Central America. Even the Romans saved the Greek priests. They saved their scientists and their educators and brought them in. And their poets. They're big on bringing in the poets. The Americans, when you become a hardcore, that culture, even colonialism degenerated along the way. They don't even save the poets now. They don't even save the true religious people of a culture. They manufacture new ones. They manufacture new images and recreate them in the movie screens. So that knowledge, that real knowledge, has always been available here. But you can't have that real knowledge if you don't have a love for your homeland. That is essential.
Because you got to go back.
You have to go back. And we need to know about some of these things of what it's like for people who have lived over in that. We need to know some of the truth of the history. I know we need to know it all.
All of us.
Yeah, all of it. When we as native people know the value of this kind of knowledge and what causes how they know this and still see a dissatisfaction, we need to know where those lines are. We need to know what those separations
Well,
are,
we're really
because those
standing
people are brought. Oh, you know, those people have come here to the Americas and done such a horrible, terrible thing to our homeland and to our people. And people can talk and say, well, in the present, you know, Indians are doing this, and if it hadn't been for us coming here, Indians would have killed each other off. You know, I get so sick of hearing this kind of crap. At any rate, what I want to see with this new college, with this new education, even the college concept itself is an enigma to Indian philosophy or to native culture. In that sense, education, of course, is not an enigma. People were constantly teaching, and we're teaching with hands-on experiences, you know. And I want that to be an element. You know, this whole, I can't even begin to discuss the whole process of it here because so many things are going to happen. So many things are going to happen with language and with the arts and with the way people look at things and the way that we research in this environment. Yeah, I do want my kids coming over to Europe to see what's going on over there. I want them to know how to, and not so much just to meet the people either. I want them to be able to use these institutions. I want our kids to know how to study. I want them to be able to go to the Vatican. Sometimes I just need to be left alone, you know. Sometimes I just need to be uh, in a place of tremendous quiet and tremendous beauty. Americans are not big on allowing people to be in silent places. Anytime there's a beautiful place in America, or a place that has not yet been discovered as an economic possibility, the first thing they do is build roads into it, of course, put signs up.
Fences.
Yes, and
Toll
fences
booths.
and toll booths, yeah, and you grade around the lake. You can't just have a place where you can just,
Sit,
you know, and go and take a little pack in there. You've got to drive. You got to make that road all the way around the lake, and on one side of it, part of the lake, the serenity of the lake, is now in. Most people think of a golf course as being something exquisitely beautiful in nature. You know, those golf courses just appear out there. I find a golf course quite like an abstract painting. You know, I find them really interesting to look at and study. You know, shape and design. It's got a lot of Salvador Dali kinds of stuff in it.